Hey, what's up, Stoner fam? Welcome to another episode of the Cannabis Man podcast. Thank you for clicking on the show. I'm your host, Don Kleppen. And if it's your first time here, welcome. This is a show where we try to take a journalistic look at all things cannabis. I've been a personal cannabis user for about 15 years, and I'm a broadcast journalist in Chicago. I do traffic and news on the radio here, have done that for many years. And once Illinois legalized cannabis recreationally in 2020, I was just kind of paying attention to the space, and after time passed, I kind of noticed, or at least I felt that, even though Colorado and other states and then Illinois had all legalized cannabis, I felt that the conversation around the plant was still missing something pretty big. And what I mean, I guess, in a simplistic light, is that I felt that more people were familiar with punchlines, the typical stereotypes of the lazy stoner and like the Hollywood caricatures of what, cannabis users were like. I felt like everybody was really familiar with those stereotypes, and nobody was really talking about, or it felt like people were not as familiar with what benefits cannabis could actually offer their lives, like what kind of improvements cannabis could make to their quality of life. So as more and more time passed and I felt like that was missing, I decided to start this podcast. I launched on April 20th of 2022, and I've been going from there. I like to talk with people who are in this field in some fashion, whether that might be a cannabis entrepreneur, somebody studying cannabis, a researcher, or a government official who is now in charge of kind of policing this legal cannabis space, which varies state by state. I'm talking to people who are on the very front line of this new green frontier, at least the legal side of it. And I bring those interviews to you, the listener. And I've had some really great interviews thus far. I've talked with a lot of amazing guests, and I've got another excellent interview for you this episode. I'm speaking today with my guest, Shawn K. Ford. He's an elected representative of Illinois' 8th District, and he is leading a cannabis working group in Illinois, which is specifically focused on how well Illinois has done in terms of equity with this legal cannabis, and which parts of the Cannabis Act, which parts of the legal cannabis use law, recreational law, can, need to be strengthened and which ones need to be adjusted. They understand, this working group, that it is not that we didn't hit the ground running with the perfect iteration of what legal cannabis in Illinois is going to look like in the future. They understand that this can use some fine tuning, that we can do better, and that's what they're endeavoring to do. And my guest, Shawn K. Ford, is here to talk a little about what their plans are and sort of what their estimation of how Illinois cannabis has been thus far, what it's done well, what needs to be improved, etc. I also like to share with you some news stories or events coming up related to cannabis or having to do with it around Illinois, and that is brought to you by IllinoisNewsJoint.com, the News Joint Wrap, as I refer to it, or any other sorts of nationally focused or globally focused developments in the cannabis space. I just kind of watch the space. Any developments I think are worth bringing to your attention, I usually like to discuss those on the show as well. I also love interacting with you, the listener. I've gotten some amazing emails, and some wonderful people are reaching out with the show, leaving reviews and ratings on different platforms. However you're listening to this podcast, there's a way that you can rate it or review it, and I just want to say thank you so much to everybody who has supported the show in that way. It really means a lot to me, and I love hearing your thoughts about the shows, any questions you've got for guests, or any topics that you think are worth discussing that I might be missing here, or if there are any companies or products that you've tried you really love and you just want to kind of put them on the radar of everybody, share it. You can reach the show at C-Man Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, or you can email host@cannabismanpodcast.com. And I certainly appreciate everyone who's reached out. So with that, let's roll on to this 44th episode of the Cannabis Man Podcast. the stuff, and we're getting into the news joint wrap right away. And let's start with an event. Aroma Grow is hosting several upcoming events, actually. This is written by Michael Lasley on IllinoisNewsJoint.com, posted about a week ago from when I'm recording this on March 26th. The Aroma Grow store recently showed off a jam-packed event lineup for this year, 2023, offering exciting chances to connect, learn some stuff, and have some good times. Some of those events that I'll get to right here include the Celebration of the Green Leaf. This is a private party for Aroma Grow customers. That's scheduled for 7 p.m. on April 20th at Aroma Grow in Wheeling on Wheeling Road. Also, the Frenchie Dreams of Hashish movie premiere is at 7 o'clock, April 29th at Aroma Grow in Wheeling as well. You can find tickets if you're interested in that movie premiere on IllinoisNewsJoint.com. And also, they're going to host the Exotic Plant Swap and Vendor Day, June 10th, as well as an anniversary party and Vendor Day, June 11th. This is also at the Aroma Grow. There's an oil party on July 10th at 7. Also, a full moon Halloween bash, October 28th at the Aroma Grow store. There are some other events going on later in the year. If you're interested in any of those or more information, you can head to IllinoisNewsJoint.com. Illinois cannabis craft grow bills are moving forward. Jason Brown wrote this story March 22nd. Several cannabis craft grow bills, which would amend the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, were referred to the Illinois House and Senate Rules Committees March 10th. Two House bills would amend premise and square footage requirements for craft growers, and a set of other bills would amend the amount of licenses craft growers can obtain, issue additional future licenses, and set aside THC oil for infusers. This would be House Bill 0032, sponsored by Representative Shawn K. Ford. Hey. This provides the premises may be shared between up to 3 craft growers, an infuser organization, a cultivation center, a dispensing organization, or any combination thereof, provided that specified requirements are met. I think that's great. It allows people to go in on a space together where somebody doesn't have to be fiscally responsible for one warehouse space just to grow their own craft operations. If it's a small operation and it's kind of a craft grow, it might be a little bit financially easier for you, less of a burden, if you could share the cost of renting a space with some other businesses, and you guys could all get use out of that together. I think that's a wonderful move. And then you got House Bill 0025, also sponsored by Ford. This is what raises specified square footage requirements for craft growers. It removes language allowing the Department of Agriculture to authorize a decrease of flowering stage cultivation space used for cultivating specified plants. It raises the maximum number of craft grower licenses for specified growers to 3 rather than 1, and 6 rather than 2, or 10 rather than 3. It also kicks out some language prohibiting craft growers from being located within 1,500 feet of each other. It also prohibits cannabis product advertising from describing or referencing a cannabis product as craft unless the cannabis product is produced by a craft grower. See, that advertising distinction, the inability now of a multi-state operator to be talking like they make craft grows, this is going to end up being a real win for craft growers, because just like microbreweries or some of these smaller companies, there's a group that I'm speaking with out of Kentucky. I have an interview with them, Cornbread Hemp, and I'm really excited to bring you that interview, listener. But they have a farm in Kentucky, and the approach that they take with their products, their gummies and their capsules and their CBD, the approach they take, which is farm to table, and they do just flower, not whole plant extraction stuff, it makes a difference. And these craft growers in Illinois that are going to be working like this and working on a craft, small, low farm to table capacity, it's going to make a difference, and there are going to be people who are looking for those products specifically. And this bill, courtesy of LaShawn Ford, 0025, we really need to hope this thing passes, because disallowing big companies to be saying that they're craft growers in ads unless they're actually a craft grow product, that I personally think is a major win. So if you'd like more information about those bills and some more of what is moving through the Illinois House and Senate related to cannabis, you can check out IllinoisNewsJoint.com. And a final one, cannabis use while on probation bill moves ahead. Illinois News Joint reported on this under-the-radar cannabis-related bill moving through the Senate. This is Senate Bill 1886, and this amends the Illinois Unified Code of Corrections to provide that a person on probation, conditional discharge, or supervision shall not be ordered to refrain from having cannabis or alcohol in his or her our body. It cleared another legislative hurdle on March 23rd when Jason published this article here. 1886 was assigned to the Cannabis Subcommittee with a March 24th deadline, and the bill was approved by the Executive Committee, now scheduled for a second reading later this month. So this moving forward is really exciting as well, for many, many reasons, but obviously people who are on probation, who are under supervision, some of this court-ordered stuff, it's foolish to disallow them from having cannabis or alcohol in their system. Everybody should be allowed to deal with the crap that reality shovels down our throats on a regular basis with whatever substance makes it easier for you to take. Alcohol, cannabis, I am all for it. Life is not easy to get through all the time, and I think, especially for people who are currently under some court-ordered supervision or some kind of situation, scheduled stuff like that, I think those people probably need a drink or a smoke even more than the rest of us. So that is an exciting prospect as well. Senate Bill 1886, watch for that one. And as with all the other stories I mentioned and cannabis-related events in or around Illinois, you can find out so much more at IllinoisNewsJoint.com. Listener, welcome back. My guest today is an elected representative of the state of Illinois. He's entering his 16th year, I believe, in the Illinois House of Representatives, representing the 8th District. He was elected in 2007. He's an outspoken advocate for his constituents, focusing on social justice, disparities in employment, education, and the healthcare system. And he's also worked to increase opportunities for ex-offenders, foster small business development, and improve access to affordable housing, as well as expand protections for veterans and safeguard the environment, along with dealing with or addressing Illinois' fiscal health. And more importantly for this audience here, he is leading a new cannabis working group, which is focusing on Illinois legal cannabis here and is working to boost industry growth and focus on equity. And here to talk about all of that is Representative Shawn K. Ford. Welcome, Representative Ford.
Thank you, Don. Thank you for having me on Clean Feed.
My pleasure. Thanks for stopping by today. And so let me see here. You're representing the 8th District. You have been since 2007-ish. And just for the listeners, if you wouldn't mind, where is the 8th District of Illinois? Where does that encompass?
Well, it's the north of Springfield, and it represents the area that I grew up in, the Austin community, the Austin neighborhood, one of Chicago's largest neighborhoods by population. Also, I represent just to the west suburbs like Oak Park, Berwyn, LaGrange Park, Brookfield, and other western suburbs.
Gotcha. Now, you have been focused and you've been working hard over the last 15 years, to, again, as I mentioned there, improving access to affordable housing and some of those neighborhoods you mentioned obviously benefiting greatly from that kind of work. Just if you could, what's something that, that you're really proud of as you look back on your work over these last 15 years? What's something that you've done that stands out that you're like, yes, well, I'm really glad I did that?
Yeah, I would say that, one, making sure that I have kept a strong relationship with the community and being my district and not getting in a bubble of Springfield. I think that it's very important that when you represent a district, when you're an elected official, that there are going to be lots of issues and there's going to be a lot of special interests, but it's most important that you listen to your constituents. And because of that, I've passed some great legislation like ban the box and the sealing of criminal records, making it easier for individuals to be tested for HIV and AIDS. And I've passed legislation to reduce the age for individuals to go to kindergarten. I sponsored legislation for cannabis to make it more equitable for Illinois, which is going to be one of the most important bills that I have passed, and people being able to actually build up communities and have stronger families as a result of being able to be a cannabis entrepreneur in Illinois.
That's fantastic. And I'm really glad you said that. It obviously touches on, why I'm, the topic that's the central to this show and, something that's really, huge and personal to me, which is cannabis, and then specifically the equity part of that. I've spoken with guests on the show before about it. And, one of the biggest, I think, things that's still around kind of staring us in the face, not to jump right into this, Representative Ford, but I was kind of thinking to myself, I've said on the show before that it is the reason equity has to be so central to this whole movement of legalization is because there are so many people who are still sitting behind bars or having their lives affected in some negative way by a cannabis conviction, by doing something that we're now encouraging in a legal light. And you're leading this new cannabis working group here in Illinois, and which is specifically focusing on growing the industry, but also that equity. You were just kind of alluding to that earlier, but can you talk a little about what the impetus was to form this group, and why is equity so important to this cannabis market going forward?
Yeah, so we talk often about what I hear in the community and from the industry, and people that aspire to be cannabis owners and dispensary owners in this space. So this new industry is creating billions of dollars in tax revenue for the state, and that there are some things that we have to continue to work on to strengthen the act, to strengthen our Cannabis Act, so that we can realize a strong industry and be a leading nation in it, so making sure the intent of the law is realized as well, making sure that the purpose of the law is fulfilled, and that is to say that if you were hardest hit by the war on drugs, if your community was hardest by the war on drugs, that you have an opportunity to participate in the industry of cannabis sales, grow, transportation, infusion, and all things related to this industry in Illinois. And so with that said, this work group is made up of people from a diverse demographics of Democrats, and we keep with the industry actually started their businesses, those that are actually struggling to upstart their business because of regulations and the law. And so we're working together to make sure that we strengthen the law so that people are successful and that Illinois realize the intent of the law.
And I know that is, people are rightfully so excited about the notions that you just kind of laid out and the work that this group is going to be doing. And I understand that, you're not going to, I'm not asking you to kind of drag the state through the mud here at all, but in your estimation, since 2019 or 2020, I guess, since recreational cannabis has been legalized in Illinois, what has the state done well, and what could it do better?
Well, I think that the state, we can say that the restorative justice part of the act is successful. And that means that hundreds of thousands of people that actually had convictions, they have seen their records expunged, not sealed, but expunged, which means forever. It's a big deal. Those people have been able to now apply for job loans, apply for housing and citizenship as a result of these convictions being removed off of their record. So that's a major success. And I would tell you, my argument has always been we did to pass cannabis legislation in order to do that. We should have done it without the legalization of cannabis. So, but what happens in government, you have to bring certain things to the table to allow for others to support. So I've tried for years since I've been down in Springfield to expunge convictions of cannabis, but that did not work. But when you add the expungement of records onto a bill that actually provides capital and economic growth for people, they begin to turn the eye to the social issue and the justice issue and say, oh, we can support it because we get something too. And so we were able to add that, and it actually gave the corporate part something, and we also gave the restorative justice model. And so that's been a major plus. Plus, the revenue from the sale has actually provided what you call the R3 funding in Illinois. And that is something that been able to provide funding to individuals in neighborhoods that have been hardest hit by the war on drugs. And it's the Restore, Reinvest, and Renew program. And that's a big thing because we take part of the revenue from the sales, from the tax sales, and we provide grants for nonprofit agencies. And it's called the R3 grants. And it's funding programs in Illinois and communities that have been harmed by the violence and excessive incarceration and economic disinvestment in those areas. And the R3 grants funds 5 different areas: the civil legal aid, the economic development, reentry, violence prevention, and youth development. And so those are the that we passed, got it right. And so where did we get it wrong? We got it wrong because, we are in Illinois, and the intent of the law was to be a social equity, diverse, focused on those hardest hit. And our start was slow to see anyone that was really impacted by the war on drugs. And that is, I would say, a failure on the state's part. We know that when this law became legal and it became effective, that we did not see Black and brown people and communities that were devastated by the war on drugs participating in this industry. And that was a failure on the state's part. And it was dominated by rich white men dominating the industry that was actually developed and implemented for those hardest hit. And so the work group actually is charged with making sure that we drive the intent of the law home, and we strengthen the law by getting more Black, brown, and women in the industry and support their development and support their businesses so that they're successful.
That's fantastic. That's wonderful news. I think that, I was hopeful that, that the work group was going to be kind of focused on that element, early on. And it sounds like you guys are focusing exactly on the right part of this that kind of needs to be improved. To your point about that. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
That's great. And I think that everyone, whether it's the big industry or the social equity, I think that we are at a point where people realize that we need to make the intent of the law a reality in Illinois if we want to be a leader in this industry to look at us as examples.
I couldn't agree more. I think that it's, when Governor Pritzker, touted the plan early on, touted the law change, equity was front and center, was part of the focus. And I completely agree with you that so far anyway, especially early on, the groups who were supposed to be benefiting or at least be impacted positively by the law change were not the ones who in fact were getting those benefits. And I do want to say, it seemed we've already seen some small movement in the other direction. We see now, we see craft growers. There's one I remember up in Rockford who's a social equity business owner. We're seeing some more business owners who, qualify under that part of it start to get their operations up and running. And that is a great thing. What, in your mind, what's first, and foremost, what are your plans with the group? What are some actions that you guys are looking to sort of in order to better drive the intent of this law home and strengthen the language on the books? What are some plans you guys have kind of early on to make these changes?
Well, the number one is to make sure that the craft growers have the ability to scale up. We need to make sure that we strengthen their ability to fund their programs, or better yet, not a program because it's not a social program, it's a business, to fund their business which means that the state must do everything it can to sort of level the playing field as much as we can by providing grants forgivable grants for businesses to scale up and open their businesses and provide the supplies they need for their businesses. So it's our goal to make sure that we cut the red tape and make sure that we have an industry that's friendly to social equity businesses so that they are able to afford to be in this, what you call a rich industry. What people need millions of dollars in order to compete. And so there are laws that we need to pass in order to allow for social equity businesses to capitalize, not just receiving funding from the state, but also go out and sell their business and be able to have partners and investors in their businesses in order to bring equity from somewhere else and able to share the equity with an investor. Right now, the law says that you have to open up before you could sell to investors. And so the business community have the resources to open. So we'll never open. So we need the ability to have our business available and search out investors. Since banks cannot lend money, we need to have private investors that want to be partners with us. And that's what they're telling us. And that's what we have to do in order to help this industry be somewhat level. Somewhat. It's never going to be level because it's still illegal in the federal code, which means that banks cannot lend. And
right.
So these social equity businesses are at a disadvantage because they lack the capital necessary, and they also lack the financial support of government and banking institutions to go and strengthen their operations.
Yes, exactly. And that's a great point. And it sort of has created this environment where every state, like Illinois is, it effectively makes them like their own country, right? Like Illinois' borders right now, in terms of cannabis laws anyway, there's no interstate commerce, there's no traveling with it across state lines. And now, on the one hand, it's made things difficult. Like, as you mentioned, there's no access to the federal banking system for these companies, so they don't have access to those lines of finance. They don't have, a capital. But on the other hand, states like Wisconsin, this came out last week that Wisconsinites came and spent something like $120 million in Illinois, leading to, $36 million in tax revenue, I believe. And in light of the R3 reinvestments in the communities you were kind of mentioning from the tax dollars of cannabis, do you think that the federal rescheduling of cannabis from the Schedule 1 substance list, do you think that is imminent anytime soon? And when it happens, what happens with these state by state, legalization things that we've the laws already?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I would tell you, if we're going to ever see the schedule being removed, I think we have a great chance with President Biden. And so if the House and Senate is controlled by the Democrats. Democrats control the House and the Senate, and the Democrats also will have the White House. Then I think that we have a good chance because Biden listens to the people, and more now than ever, there's a push to do this, and it will give states rights. And I think that it will allow for banks to lend, which is great, and kick the rights to states to decide on regulations. And that's what we need to start with. I understand that, that could still be an issue where you can't really regulate interstate commerce where you could sell one state to the next. But we got to start somewhere, sort of reminds you of the gun laws, right? Mm-hmm. And so rights will be able to dictate, and states can then also do reciprocity with one another. And that would be within states' rights to deal with reciprocity as it relates to cannabis laws.
Now, when you say reciprocity, I'm just curious, what do you mean exactly by that? Like sort of selling between states, like businesses in Illinois could outsource cannabis from somewhere else?
Right, because right now if I wanted to sell, well, let's rephrase that, because as a legislator, we have voted ourselves out of the industry. So members of the General Assembly that voted for the law cannot own in cannabis.
Gotcha.
And so what would happen is it would allow for me to sell to a board state if I'm growing cannabis. I could sell my product to. Yes, right now, I can only sell it, and that's not good for others. And so that's what states can allow, for you to sell your products like your craft grow across the. And also, right now, you don't have a right to use your cannabis medical card to avoid taxes in another state. So there are cannabis cards where medical cannabis, in one state, you have the ability to use it. But if you travel outside of your state, your card is not valid.
Right. Yeah, I've experienced that for sure. And that's definitely, I agree with you completely. That is an exciting prospect. I know there's a lot of people listening, medical card holders that are excited about that too. Representative LaShawn Ford, thanks for jumping on. I just have a couple more questions if you can. Yes. You mentioned President Biden. I also agree. I think he's definitely the best shot to legalize, and hopefully, if Democrats can control or, maintain control of the houses of Congress, then I think our shot really, gets pretty strong. But let's look locally. We're recording this on March 20th. There's a runoff mayoral election. You may have already given your endorsement for which candidate, and I apologize if I'm just not familiar with it. But I'm curious. Do you have a thought about either Brandon Johnson or Paul Vallis as to who would make the better mayor for Chicago?
Well, I've been watching closely. Been in the race for mayor in 2019. I think that both of them are making a case for their constituent base. And I think that Brandon is a fantastic debater and a smart man, and he's making the case of why he should be the mayor. And I think that Paul Vallis also is a smart debater, and he's making his. And so the question is, who will get their voters to the polls? That's what it boils down to. For me, I'm listening to my constituents. I like to see what end up, and April 4th, Chicago will notably be headed in a different direction.
Yeah, and one more just final thing. When you mentioned those R3 grants, for the neighborhoods, that are meant to be reinvested in with these funds from cannabis sales and whatnot. If anybody is looking to apply for some of those grants, if you have the information, how can they go about doing that?
It actually will be available for people to apply on the ICEJA's website, and they will be able to go to the ICEJA website in order to apply for those grants. And also, while I get you that information, I want to say that there's also a need for Illinois to have what you call the 280 rule, 280E rule, to be implemented. We need to make sure that we implement the 280 rule. And so what that is, the federal government has actually said that states could allow for businesses to file what you call the 280E, which allows for businesses to write off certain tax burdens that's related to their businesses. So they would be able to, the retailers and they would be able to write off things for their businesses like rent, utilities, insurance, and other taxable expenses. And that would be very, very helpful for the businesses to add money back to their operations, to be strengthened and to hire more people and to invest more into their business for a stronger industry in Illinois. And to answer your question, it's the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority is where they can go and apply for funding.
Got it.
Yes.
Illinois, one more time, Illinois Justice and Criminal Information Authority?
No, it'll be Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority, ICJIA.
ICJIA. Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay. So that's
all right.
Yeah, totally. So that's the website people could go to if they're interested in those grants, which is excellent information. And you've given us a lot of great information and stuff to think about, Representative Shawn K. Ford of Illinois' 8th District. Thank you so much for stopping by today, and really appreciate the work that you're doing on Illinois' Cannabis Working Group. And I think there's a lot of people who are excited about the stuff that you're working on and how it's going to impact Illinoisans well into the future.
Thank you, Don. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And there you have it, listener. I want to thank one more time my guest, Representative Shawn K. Ford of Illinois' 8th District. You can really hear that he does have equity front and center. That is the focus of this Illinois Cannabis Working Group, and it definitely needs to be worked on. So I'm glad to hear that Representative Ford leading the group definitely seems to have the right stuff in mind when it comes to how to maybe best achieve this, or what's most important in terms of what needs to change right now from how Illinois launched this program and kind of how we can get it to a place that feels more equitable, that is more equitable for those who have been hardest hit by the war on drugs. And I really do believe that Representative Ford and the others on that group are going to get us closer to where we want to be on that front. And remember, if you're interested in those R3 grants, you can head to that ICJIA website. And yeah, I personally think that those R3 grants are going to be some of the real lasting legacy, some of what's really tangibly improving people's lives from this newly legalized cannabis in Illinois. These, the revenue that we've gotten from cannabis, we all know how much it is, and there's millions that the state has set aside here that are meant to be distributed in these grants to go to people who have been hardest hit by the war on drugs. So if you're interested, head to that ICJIA website and see if you can't get some of that cannabis grant money and find a way to make it work for you. You know what I'm saying? So that's all I've got for you this week. I will be back again next week with another interview and another news joint wrap and lots more cannabis topics to talk with you about on the Cannabis Man podcast. Bye-bye. Cannabis Man is an original production of myself, Don Kleppen. Original theme music by Yusu Kim, aka Goodson. Other music by Pat Perez, and logo designed by Vorbroker Media. If you like the show, please rate, review, subscribe, and share whenever you can.